I'll
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Front Door Show. It is 8:13. Running a little late. We had a little technical difficulties here, but we got it all figured out and stuff like that. So today I have dancer, business owner Miguel Tech. But go ahead and why don't you tell people, give a little introduction of who you are, and now start setting the watch parties and stuff like that.
no problem. I'll share it here too. But thank you, Angelo. Thank you for having me here on the front door show. You've been doing an incredible job with interviewing such amazing talent. I'm honored to be on here. I guess to just give a little introduction on myself. I've Where do I start? I started organizing breakdancing events back in, or what we call breaking events, back in 2002. I've been very passionate about photography and video since I was a kid, as a result that came from my parents, my grandfather, and just so many family members that have a passion for photography. Everyone in my family is a photographer, so uh, that was definitely a big part of my inspiration in pursuing that side of the things that I do. But when I started doing events in 2002, I realized the importance of documenting those events, and ultimately that's what kind of pushed me to pursue it more professionally, more seriously. And as time went on, 2011 to be exact, when I stopped working my corporate job, is when I kind of reflected on my life. And at that time, I already had about 10 years of experience of editing, pre-YouTube era, learning from just trial and error of using the program of Adobe Premiere Pro. And at that point, I just decided that I just didn't want to work for anyone else. And I said to myself, I'm like, well, I'm pretty okay at this video stuff. So let me just give it a shot. And that's been my full-time thing since 2011.
Right. So let's talk about the beginning, because you started, you said breakdancing, right? That's what you were doing first before the video thing.
Well, what got me into hip hop was actually graffiti. Was
Okay.
was in the 90s, uh, probably like around like 94, 95. I was about probably 12 or 13. My neighbors, my neighbor to this day, Melvin, and one of my other close friends, Tony, we used to play baseball together, and it was just one of those things that they started doing. They're Puerto Rican, so, and I'm Mexican, growing up in Humboldt Park. And they were, my friend Melvin was doing the bachata, the salsa. He realized early on that the girls loved, a guy that could dance. So he was really into bachata and salsa. And then he started with the breaking, which is where I first started seeing it. And then Tony was into graffiti. And by that time, around the age of 12, 13, 14, I was already into the arts. My dad taught my siblings and I how to draw since we were little. So I remember when I first saw graffiti and he had his book with like these vibrant colors, I was like, wow, what is that? Like, I want to do that. And I guess that's where it started. But by my official introduction into the world of what many know as hip hop culture came by ways of graffiti. The breaking I was doing, but I didn't really start taking more seriously until like when I was in high school. So like around like 90, 97, 98. And then by 2002 is when I was just completely like engulfed in the breaking element. And I kind of left graffiti. I mean, I still do it. I still, doodle in my books, and it's something that I find very therapeutic when I'm editing and I have to wait for a long time for things to process. But yeah, that's kind of it in a quick little summary.
Well, you are, in technical terms, compared to where I started breakdancing, 20 years later. That's kind of so. But I've seen breakdancing go through some changes. It
Mhm.
went through, goes up and down, and then what was the scene back in 96, 97? What was the breaking dance scene back then? Was there a big community? Was there a small community? How was it back then?
Man, well, in like the mid '90s, it was really just my 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 neighbors and my brother. So I wasn't really involved with it like seriously until like the later 90s. So like 90, I remember it being around like sophomore, junior high school. I graduated in 2000. So that was like 97, 98. So somewhere around there. I was obviously doing it before then, but I wasn't really considered like what I would consider being involved with the community until later on. So at that time, it was um, it was interesting just because when the 2002 hit, like this, like the community kind of condensed. Like a lot of people quit. There were a lot of groups that quit, so it wasn't too big, and it was really underground. It was before YouTube, so the only way you had access to it was by like VHSs that were very very hard to come by. There was the Hip House that I remember that was over in the Brickyard Mall over on Fullerton, and a few other places that had VHSs. So it was very small, it was very underground. I remember going to like what was it, Mambo nightclub, the Orbit, which were both on Milwaukee, right there
Mhm.
on Milwaukee, and where was Mambo? Mambo was on the second floor of Milwaukee, and what street is that? Is it California? No, Milwaukee and Fullerton. You remember Mambo?
That, yeah, if it was Fullerton and second floor, that was the, oh, we were just talking about Marco Hernandez. That was on the second floor, but that was a banquet hall. That wasn't Mambo. Mambo was over on by Pulaski and on Milwaukee. That was Marco.
What was it
Yeah,
called?
oh God, we're just, yeah, it was called oh, Marco's going to tell me right now. I know he's going to tell me because
I'm gonna
he
jump.
listens. Um, God, I can't think of it.
I'm trying to
We're
think of what
talking
it's
about
called too. I think it started with an M though, didn't it?
Marco. You would tell us what the name of it is. The place where they used to DJ and they used to do Thursday nights there. They used to do, oh God, above the 7-Eleven on the
Yeah,
second
yeah,
floor. Yeah,
exactly.
that's just,
Hmm.
God. I can't think of the name
What
right
was the
now.
name of it? I can't remember. That was actually the first club that I went to. My friend Melvin, I remember telling my mom I was gonna go sleep over at his house, and we snuck out. And his cousin was like one of the security guards, and it was 18 and over at that time. But I wasn't 18 when we went. We were probably like, man, like probably like 15 or 16.
Right.
So, and there were all kind of parties. Their house, there was breaking. Um, but yeah, that was my first experience as a club, but I can't remember the name of it. Now that I think of it, it wasn't because you're right. Mambo was further on Pulaski,
Right.
and but I'm trying to think what was the name of that club now. I'm gonna have to.
Well, it's someone he's going to tell us. He'll tell us. Trust me. Oh, that Royal, the Royal. It was called the Royal
The
at the
Royal,
time.
there you go. We used to call it, there you go, the Royal, because we used to make fun of it. We're like, no, we're not going to the Royal, we're going to the Royale to
Yeah.
make it sound fancy, because we all know that it wasn't a fancy spot.
It wasn't. It was. I mean, it served its purpose. I mean, as far as the
Yeah.
party room, served
Hmm.
its purpose. I know that was a lot of people were there, so
Yeah.
definitely it served its purpose. So they had their little breakdancing event there, and um, you end up. What did you just automatically just jump in and start breakdancing, or were you just like, okay, I want to see everybody doing it, and how was it? How did you, because I'm just wondering, like you said you liked it, so did you go there and says, well, I practice these moves at home, and then I'm gonna go ahead and show these guys what I can do right then and there? Is
No,
that
I mean,
how
at,
it
at,
happened for you?
at that time, when I went there wasn't a breaking event. It was just a regular just party. Remember, they had like a dancing contest, but there was no breaking going on. That was like probably till like later on, and probably
Right.
before it was shut down. But yeah, no, at that time it was just regular club that played like top 40s, and I remember them playing house music and things of that nature. But no, I didn't
Okay.
break it. I didn't break it at the Royale at that time.
Okay.
At that time, it was strictly just us practicing in my mom's kitchen. We used to move the table, and she'd come home and like, "What are you guys doing? Like, why'd you move my table out the way?" Because my brother and it was my brother too, my brother at that time, and my neighbor Melvin. That was pretty much what we did. And then aside from that, later on, my first major experience was shortly after that. Was one of my birthdays. Melvin was, because he went to Clementi and I went to Holy Trinity, and he had told me, he's like, man, I know, like there's these two guys that go to Clementi that are really good. I'm gonna invite them to your party. And I was like, yeah, yeah, bring, invite them over, because prior to that, I really hadn't seen much besides like a few VHS tapes here and there. And they were really my first experience of seeing people that were like really, really good. Like at that time, we completely sucked. So so when they came, like that really changed everything for me. Like I still remember that moment perfectly. Flacco had incredible headstands, and still to this day, Tornado T, a good friend of mine, shorter, had really good turtles, and after I saw them too, like I was just completely hooked. Like I was still doing the graffiti, but after seeing them, I was like, wow, I was just so mind blown. And then they told me, they're like, yeah, we practice. You should come by. And yeah, there were times when I was get out of school from Holy Trinity, or after working with my dad, because once I started going to Holy Trinity, my dad had a jewelry store right down the street, right in Milwaukee, and Ashland was right down the street from Holy Trinity, which is on Division and right off of Ashland. So pretty much right after school, I had to go to my dad's to go work with him. We would close at 5 or 6, and right after that, I would go to Clementi and try to catch whatever time I had left. My beginning introduction stages to the world of breaking.
Right. So are your break dance, you're still so you still do your graffiti, right? I mean, you're still doing your kind of, but I mean, um, when do you get proficient? I guess is for the dancing part of it, and where do you get proficient in the graffiti part of it, or where does that, what part of that in your life does that happen for you?
Well, I guess proficiency is all subjective. I think the bigger part of it is just like the purpose behind it. For me,
Hmm.
like I don't really do those things for popularity. I don't really do those things to make money. That was never really my intentions with the culture. It was just something that I gravitated towards. It's something that is therapeutic for me. Till this day I still practice actively, not as much as I used to, just because I have back issues, but it's something that's just, it's a huge release. It's not any different. I always tell people it's not any different than a group of people that get together to go play basketball or go play soccer. Like it it's just one of those things that is just, it's just a huge release. And many people have said it before, I have, and it's something that's therapeutic. There's definitely a spiritual connection to it, just like in many other dance styles, that when you really get caught into the moment of the music, you just start reacting. And once you've spent enough time and you've learned the foundation of the dance, it just becomes second nature, where there's moments where the music just takes over your body, and you have this spiritual connection with the music. And that's one of the most purest forms of this dance, that till this day I've just learned to just value so much. Because there's been so many times where I'll go out, where you go out and dance, or where I've gone out and dance, and you have that connection to the music, where you just get lost, and you get up and people are telling you, man, you killed, say you did so good, and you can't even remember what you did, because you're literally just reacting to that moment. And it's not any different than like what you see in salsa, mambo, and with and the same thing. Like you have the breaks in the record where you get loose and you make that connection. So yeah, it's kind of what it's always been for me. It's a release. It's a way of me just channeling my creative, just being. Graffiti to this day is just something that I still do, and is just something that I do, not for getting acknowledgement from anyone else, but more than anything, just something that I do. It's very therapeutic for me. Like for me to sit on a piece of paper and draw and sketch and bring color and twist letters and bend them in different ways. The possibilities are literally endless. And the same way with dance, the combinations are endless, and they're always going to be different every time that you approach it. So yeah, more than anything for me
I
is
get
just a big release.
I guess what I was asking is, Well, thank you for the insight on that. But I guess I was asking, when do you start to look at it as, okay, you know what, I can make a business out of this, or I can make events out of this, or I can, where does that transition for you? I mean, what was that like? Wait a minute, this, you know, I guess that's what I'm.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, well, that's the thing, is that for me it's never been about business. You know, I did those things just as a result. They just happened. I guess to answer your question, when I started doing events, they just happened. In 2002, I was in a group called TNA, the New Addiction, and I was just surrounded by just incredibly talented individuals, that, you know, it was just one of those things that happened organically. It wasn't one of those things where I was like, well, you know what, I'm going to charge X amount, and I'm going to do this, and now I have it. It wasn't like that, you know. To an extent, you know, there is a certain amount of business that's required to be able to make just any kind of event happen. So that just came naturally, just because of the foundation that was set through my father, and working with him since I was 13 at his jewelry store. But yeah, it was just one of those things that came organically, because, like I said, in our group in TNA, which stood for the New Addiction, the Nasty Assassins, Top Notch Artists. We had four DJs, which was Juan, Jam One, Jay Rio, Mano, which later ended up, you know, DJing for Kanye West, and then we also had Vince, Vino. So it just I just had all the resources around me, and at that time, it was the year after I started working my corporate job, and I kind of had the money. I was living at my parents' house. I was making close to like almost 3 grand a month, and the only real expense that I had was a car, my car note, which was about 300. And I was reflecting on my life, and I remember just saying, well, what am I gonna do with all this money? I'm kind of living at home. I don't have any expenses, and that's where it kind of happened. I was like, well, let me go look at a space. And the first event that I ended up doing was out in the Arlington Heights YMCA. I rented the venue, and the guys brought the turntable equipment, which they already had. You know, one of the guys hosted, you know, because we had people in our group that rapped, which was Hollywood Hope, known as Days One, and yeah, the rest is kind of history. It just started happening.
Right. So, I mean, but when did you start wanting to document it? That's, I guess maybe that's where,
Oh, document since the very beginning. Since the very beginning,
okay.
when I was in well, like I said, my parents, my dad, my grandfather, my uncles, like they all love photography. So that's just been something that I think was instilled in me since very early on. I mean, I have memories from like even like at the age of like 10 or 11, you know, using my dad's camera and playing with my dad's camera. But as far as like the uh the hip hop stuff, it when I was when I was a junior in high school, my girlfriend at the time, her father had one of those JVC VHS cameras, like the big ones that you would put tapes in. And I remember asking him, yo, can I borrow it? And I remember using it to record, like I was practicing, because I realized early on that, you know, you when you dance, like you might think something looks good, but it doesn't really look as good as you think, you know, which is why it's good to have people around you that can tell you, hey, you know, you might want to try something else because that doesn't really fit you. But video was just an extension of that, like to play back, you know, like your movements, to really dissect what you were doing was one of them. And then the other aspect was just to kind of reflect on these memories and experiences that we were having, that we were sharing together. So when we started doing events, it was only natural to document them. So and I found out early on that it was really important, you know. And at that time, I had a really good job, so I purchased a camera. It was a high mini DV, which I still have. I think I have it somewhere around here. But yeah, that was one of the original cameras that I have, a high 8 mini DV. I'm sorry, not a high 8 mini DV. Those are two different types. A high 8 camera, a mini DV is a different camera. But yeah, early on since the very first event, like I understood that it was really important to document what we were doing, and that's really one of the things that set us apart, like early on an international level, because at that time, this is pre YouTube, and Juan Jam One was actually one of the key essential persons that was doing website development at that time and editing, and he was the main reason on why a lot of our material ended up going online. And I mean, since 2002, 2003, our material, our events were being seen in France. They were being seen in Mexico. They were literally being seen all around the world, because at that time, like there were very, 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 very few people that were putting out breaking material, much less on the internet. And then during that time, it was dial up. So you got to remember too, like, like my original computer only had like maybe like 60 gigs of hard drive space. So we had to take things in segments, and which is the reason why we would do highlight clips. And then we found that those highlight clips were essential in promoting future events. And that's what helped us a lot with getting people from different cities to come out to our events, because we were putting out, material.
Was what did you guys create a production company or was it a promotion company? Was it always your
Mm,
how,
well, in the original stages, it was Technological Productions Presents, which is where the TCK Pro comes from. It's just a shorter version of Technological Productions, but that was the original name that I was using to promote the events. But no, aside from that, like we were a crew, like our crew was TNA. For the most part, that's what we identified as. And that was just the name. The Technological Productions name, it was strictly only when I did events, which were happening just about once a year. At that time, there weren't really many events happening in Chicago. There was only one person that was doing events on a pretty large scale. Other than that, it was really, really small events, and clubs here and there, like the Orbit and other places. So
what you had mentioned that your stuff was being seen all over the world. Did you have people coming from other countries coming to Chicago for
oh
your
yeah.
events when you did the events?
Later on, yes, we had people that came from like Japan. Where else? We had people that have come from Mexico. We had a gentleman that came from Africa. So yeah, we had people that ended up not necessarily traveling specifically to come out to the event. They just happened to be in town, but they were from other countries, and they would find out about the event. But yeah, we had definitely had people from all over the U.S. that were coming, specifically like Texas. Texas has always been really, really big supporters of what we do. New York, Florida. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of the things that when I reflect on today was a huge game changer for us, was the fact that we were putting out material on the internet.
And I guess one of the things that I'm going to remark on is that this wasn't uh, your events were kind of the exclusive events, right? It wasn't. This wasn't like,
It froze up a little bit
all
there.
right.
Can you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was saying that your breakdancing events wasn't like multiple events were happening in Chicago. Pretty much, if you did your event, the breakdancing event, that was the big event. That was kind of the big event in Chicago. People would know about it, and it was there wasn't a lot of breakdancing events, little small events. I'm saying yours was like kind of um, if somebody wanted to do breakdancing, they knew it was your event that they wanted to go to.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was definitely one of them. It was our event that was definitely known, especially here in Chicago. And at that time, like I said, there was only one other event going on. So if you were into the breaking scene at that time, like you were definitely there, just because you kind of had no choice. There was nothing else going on, especially at that magnitude. So yeah.
So, and the reason why I'm asking that question, it's a setup question for you. So that there's pros and cons of it, correct? Um, Pros is that because people from all over the world, they're coming to a specific date for your event. They don't have to like make choices and say, oh, I'm gonna come in June for this one, I'm gonna come in July for this one, I'm gonna come in August for that. They knew that that event was the event to come to Chicago. So I'm sure people would make their plans around the dates that you would have your events. And that helps the community as far as the break community. Did you guys, because of the fact that you were doing it like this, were you guys traveling out of state to go to other people's events because it was happening in the other little cities?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that, because that's actually the way that I was getting connected to a lot of people.
Okay.
I was the first event that I traveled to was an event in, I think it was, yeah, Out for Fame, which was in California. And then another event that I was going to early on was called B-Boy City, which was out in Texas, which in 2002, when I went out to, I met a group called Jive Turkeys, and I later brought them out the following year. So when I was traveling, I was pretty much I was scouting, in essence, and seeing these talented individuals in different cities, and especially during that time where there was two groups that were really big that kind of quit around that time. So it was kind of like we had kind of like no choice but to kind of like bring other people out to not just make it competitive, but just to have competitions, because it kind of left it like where there were really only like four or five crews, where before it was like seven or eight. And in just between those two groups, I mean, like 20 people that kind of almost stopped at the same time. So I found it was kind of a big deal for me, like to be able to go to these different cities and find these people that no one had ever heard of or seen in Chicago, and then to see them and say, hey, like, let me bring you guys a van and bring you guys out here to Chicago, which is how we got Jive Turkeys out here, the group from Texas. I rented them a van in 2003, and they drove from Texas. This was in December of 2003, and I had gone to Texas earlier that year with a B girl named Loki, which is how I met that group. And they came out, they won the competition, and it was pretty epic, to have them out here. Yeah, that was how I was meeting a lot of people, was by traveling and going out to other events, because at that time I had a really good job, and that was kind of my escape, was to travel to a different city and kind of get away from for the weekend. And at the same time, I was meeting individuals that we were ended up bringing out to our events.
Well, I guess my obvious question would be what happened, because breakdancing was known in New York. I would think New York would have been the hub of it, or was the hub of it. At what was going on with New York in this whole time frame?
It's interesting that you asked that. In New York, I didn't really see too much activity coming from the New York area during during
Wow.
during that time. There were like jams and events going on, but not to that scale. Like the big events that I remember from those the early 2000s that were like on a national scale were going on like in California and Texas, and then a little bit later on Florida. But like New York, I don't really. I remember going out there, but there weren't too many, as you would think. But the but
Right.
just in general, like the bigger events that have kind of happened throughout the years have pretty much been like in California, Texas, and then here in Chicago. I mean, there were pretty big events, the ones that we were doing, as well as the other one that was happening, which was City versus City.
All right. And then 2003, 2004, what happens with you as far as this industry? And I guess both the video, break graffiti, what happens with you? What's your traditions with that?
Well, 2003, 2004, like the events gradually started getting bigger, and we were the connection started getting deeper. I was traveling a lot more. By 2003, 2004, I was pretty much traveling to almost every major event that I could find. So I guess to answer your question, they just got bigger, and they were getting a little bit more structured, more organized. And you got to remember, when I started doing events, they weren't done with the intention of doing it like as something serious. It kind of just happened. So I didn't really have a mentor. No one really taught me how to put these events together. It's kind of just something that I kind of figured out just from attending other events like B-Boy City and others that I was going to, and just watching and experiencing their events, and kind of putting my own twist on it when I was doing them here in Chicago.
Well, then this is about the time when YouTube is starting to come out, right? This is
Hmm.
2003, 2004. So how does that change your aspect of the breakdancing? As it YouTube is part of this, does that make it more accessible for people to watch? Do you get a larger audience because of this?
YouTube definitely changed the game quite a bit, but for us, I mean, it was kind of just an extension of what we were already doing.
Okay.
Like the major difference was that before YouTube, you'd have to host it on the server, and then you'd have to put it on the website, or you'd have to send it to someone. And then YouTube just kind of changed the game, as in it kind of just simplified the process of it all.
Okay.
So it kind of changed things in the regards where it simplified things, but it was still a tedious process in terms of the editing, in terms of the technology, because it, between 2002 and 2004 there wasn't really that much advancements when it came to like the hardware, which was a part of it. Like to export material and to capture the material from these tapes was a it's a very lengthy process. It's not the same as it is now, where you just copy and paste and you can go to sleep. Like before, you'd have to actually put in the tape, you'd have to watch it, and you'd have to watch it capturing on your system to make sure that it wouldn't drop frames, and you'd have to save it. So the process was different, before, but yeah, like it didn't change too much. The copy and paste technology didn't really start until maybe what 8, 10 years ago,
Okay.
so.
Well, did it also YouTube, as far as breakdancing is concerned, also make it accessible for people to find other videos that, like, and when I mean other videos way before you, way, 1980, or should I say my time, all of a sudden they discover that there's breakdancing videos of archive aspects of it, so.
Well, you would think, but no, not really, because it wasn't that easy to get the material up there. You real back during that era, you really, now it's easier. Back then, like it was way more difficult and complicated, even to get material on YouTube. So even then, it was still hard to
Okay.
find material. Yeah, it didn't really become oversaturated to the extent what you see now until like maybe the last 10 to 12 years. But it kind of, but like I said, there were other people that were putting out material online. B-Boy World was one of the big game changers. That was an organization that I was a part of, like around 2003 and 2002, and they really changed the game in the sense that it was a forum on the website, and people would upload their material and they would put it on there. So it wasn't really YouTube itself; it was more the B-Boy World platform that really brought everyone together. And the thing that B-Boy World did differently than anyone else did was that you were literally getting material from all around the world. Other websites had material, but it wasn't. It was just kind of like bits and pieces. But B-Boy World, once they became really active with the video element of things, which was 2003, 2004, is when you really started seeing like a really heavy presence, and you really started seeing like what people were doing in different parts of the world.
Okay. And then, all right, so let's fast forward to 2010, okay? Because now you're talking about things are progressing even more. What happens with your company, or what happens with you in 2010? What changes for you?
Well, it was 2011 actually when I stopped working at AT&T. I lost my job, and yeah, I was reflecting on my life, and I said, well, I kind of don't want to go work for anyone else again. And at that time, I already had about 10 years of experience in editing, which was all pretty much just traveling, editing for my events, and capturing these events that I was traveling to. Because pretty much almost every event that I've ever been to, I have it on some kind of tape. Um, but yeah, in 2011, when I reflected, I was like, well, you know what? Let me give this a shot. And as a matter of fact, like that was a year that I did one of my biggest events ever. I had a 401k and I cashed it out, so I was penalized heavily because of that. And I decided to do an event, which was at Logan Square Auditorium. It was the second time that I used that venue. And to date, it's one of the best events that I've ever organized. We had people, I flew out about 14 people, including two DJs. One was from Seattle, one was from New York, which was Bless One and DP1, and then just various other competitors that literally came from all over. I had people from New York, from Boston, from California, Texas. So yeah, 2011 was definitely definitely a very um, game changing year for me in terms of just my life as a whole, as well as what was going on with these events. Angelo, you still there?
And then, all right, so let's fast forward to 2010.
Hello, hello. We lost you, Angelo. I'm going to give it a second here, everyone. Hopefully Angelo can get back in here.
Can you
There
hear me?
you go. Yes,
Sorry
sir.
about that. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, so I was
Yeah,
like, let me give it a couple seconds here.
yeah, I mean, obviously, because it's raining over here and stuff like that, it'll do it every so often. So you were saying, I'm sorry, 2011, you quit your job for one, the biggest event. What was the name of that event? You said you brought out two DJs, one from Seattle, and I think that was the last thing we used.
Yeah, well, one was from Seattle, one was from New York. The one from Seattle's name is Bless One, and then the one from New York is DP1. Check, check. You still there, Angelo? Can you hear me?
You were saying? What was it called?
Well, the event, it's the same event that I started in 2002. It's called Who Came to Serve.
Okay. And you said you brought two DJs, one from Seattle. Is that what you said? And what was the other?
Yeah, one from Seattle. His name is Bless One, and then one from New York. His name is DP1.
All right. And then you said you 14 people, and that was in 2011. And what was the attendance on something like that? What was the
The attendance, well, it was Logan Square Auditorium, so it was pretty much we almost sold out. You know, if, Logan Square Auditorium at that time, the capacity was somewhere around 700-800. So we had probably close to like 700 people throughout the night, and it was an 11-hour event too, and people stayed pretty much almost the whole time.
11-hour event? Wow. So for just in case people don't understand what a breakdancing event consists of, maybe you can do a quick. You say 11 hours. Why 11 hours? Maybe I'm missing something here. Why?
Well,
Why
I
11
mean,
hours?
well, for 11 hours, just because I don't know, it was just reflecting on it. Could have been shorter, but I mean, in a nutshell, when you go to a breaking event, it's not just about the competitions. You know, like you have to allow a certain amount of time for people to to socialize, to cipher. Which for us, ciphering is when there's a circle going on and there's an exchange of energy. It's kind of like the essence, the base of breaking. You know, competitions came way later. You know, the essence of dancing in a cipher is a connection between those people in that circle. So it's kind of like, in essence, like the warm up before the actual competition start. We
Okay.
had an MC battle. There were various things going on, so it wasn't just the main feature of the night was the competition, the breaking element, of course, but there were other things going on. And then the other part of it too is that people never show up on time, so there was that element too of making it long enough where people kind of where we allowed enough time where people could get there and still compete.
So what time did you open the doors for this? I mean, is this
Man,
it's kind of a
I have to double check. I think we finished at man, somewhere around 10. So we had to have started it probably like around like noon or 11, somewhere around there, like
oh
noon.
wow. So that's why I was that's why I couldn't understand how as 11 hours is that it's so this is a all day, it's a day thing. It's not
Yeah.
just it's not like a nightclub, normal nightclub setting. It's a 12 noon to 12 to like kind of all
Yeah.
day thing. Is that a normal process for breakdancing events?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, they're not in club settings. You know, like
Okay.
that was probably like those were the earlier stages of the dance. But for the most part, all my events were typically during the day. Like they were typically done and over with by 10, mainly because we wanted to keep the party element separate. You know, whether that was
Right.
a group of us getting together to have a few drinks afterwards or go to a club, and that was always a separate experience.
Is
But
this all ages too?
yeah, that's the other thing
Yeah.
about it too, is that at all my events there was never any alcohol sales, and they were all age events. Mhm.
Okay, all right. So that would explain the ending early Yeah,
Mhm.
that would explain the ending on the. So you did, time to serve. Um, at this time, are you, are, any-
Check, check. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. So I was asking, because I've seen some, I was asking, getting approached by any sponsors, or was this, because I seen Red Bull, coming into play into a lot of breakdancing. So when does that all happen?
Yeah, no, I mean, I always built my foundation on my own funding. I never wanted to depend on anyone else. And at that time, there weren't really sponsors per se. I mean, there were people that were giving us clothes. Wild Style Technicians, which is a clothing company out of California, was sending us clothes. And then later on, Panic 39, which is also out of California. So there were people that were setting up booths, for example, at the events, like to sell like merch, the t-shirts and things of that nature. But there was never any like major sponsorships. But when it comes to Red Bull, they came way later into the picture, and I actually organized various events for them as well here in Chicago when they first started making a presence.
And then was that something that that was totally separate from you, that they decide to do events and then they would contact you because you were the marketer of all the other breakdancing events here? Is that how it kind of
Yeah.
went?
Well, yeah, that was exactly it. I mean, just in general, they don't really sponsor. The only thing that if they do give you something, they'll give you energy drink, but it's not in their model to sponsor events because they do their own event. Um,
Right.
so yeah, they would never. They never. It was separate. When I did things for them, it was something completely separate. Just like I did stuff for Hot Import Nights, Dub Tour, so many other events that I've organized in my lifetime that were completely separate from mine.
Right, right. I mean, I worked with hot imports, and I remember that was part of marketing that they do and stuff like that. They kind of crossover, and I understand that. And I remember that was one of the discussions. I was already doing my I was working at 720 at the time, and I hadn't did full blown Latin events yet. But I remember Hot Imports was asking for that marketing aspect of crossover marketing because we were handling everything, all styles of music. But I do remember the breakdancers there at the Hot Import nights and stuff like that. So that was kind of a big draw. Um, then I guess when do you become Miguel Tech? I mean, I guess that's is that something that as a because is that was the breakdancing name, or is that something that came after the fact of when you started this as far as the technical aspect of it?
And well, the name Tech I had since high school. That was originally
Okay,
that was originally my graffiti name, and
okay.
yeah, I mean, I had, that was before cell phones, and I had people calling the house asking for tech. And my mom, I remember in the original stages, people would call and my mom would think it was a prank. She'd be like, who is this tech? Guinness Tech? Who's tech? Like, and so yeah, I had that name since high school. But yeah, in terms of like the technology, it was just, it's just something that ended up happening, like I said, organically once again, just because my grandfather, my father, and just having a good job and realizing the importance of documenting these events.
So, and then I guess it's you start doing more video photography. Is that where or were you doing both at the same time as the later years for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing it early on, so it was
Okay.
just like I said. I mean, it's something I've been taking pictures since the '90s. I started with disposable cameras and taking my dad's camera on occasion. He had an Olympus 35 millimeter. So I mean, they've always been around me. So it was just once again something that just naturally happened. As far as me doing it professionally, that's not something that started until 2011.
I'm sorry. What year did you start professionally?
2011.
Okay. Well, that's what you said, and that was after you lost your AMTT job, right? That's what you basically saying.
Yeah.
Um, so let's fast forward 2017 is when I first met you. Is that about right? Is that when you had a phone call discussion?
Yeah, it was around that time, 2017. Yeah,
Yeah,
somewhere
that's
around there.
okay. So if you find out you already knew my position as far as because of the salsa events, four fantastic events. But I think I shocked you with something that I was the president of the floor masters, the breakdancing crew that was here.
Hmm.
So what was your take on the floor masters for from that? Because obviously that was way before your time. So I guess that was what was your take on that as far as finding that out, as far as me being the original breakdancers here in Chicago.
Well, I mean, I didn't expect that, because obviously I reached out to you because I saw what you were doing with the salsa events. But it just came as a shock, like I wasn't too familiar with floor masters just because there's not too much history out there of them. But I was aware that they were a crew from the 80s. So when you told me you were the president, I was kind of like, wow, what a small world, like I'm reaching out to you, thinking that, oh, well, this guy, only does salsa. He doesn't do anything else. And little did I know that you were the president and one of the founding members of Floor Masters. So it's kind of crazy.
I mean, one of the guys has sent me something on Facebook, Daryl, a list of all the breakdancing groups in Chicago. And trust me, I knew there was always a lot of groups. I didn't know what there were 30 of them, but there was, and at one point this breakdancing was a big part of Chicago's movement. I mean, it was back in the 80s, 80s to 87. I want to say that was when breakdancing became a big part of the scene. And I got to say, became a big part of a lot of people's lives, because if you listen to any of the interviews, you hear people talk about, oh, I started breakdancing, guys that have been DJing for a long time. Kind of that was their thing, and I think that was the introduction to a lot of people into going to music. And I guess it's what you said about dancing, the release, and getting into the music. And I could see that because I did the same thing. Here I was breakdancing, and I felt the music, and it got me into wanting to do more with the music. Obviously, became a DJ. So did that ever cross your mind as far as DJing wise, and because you were into the music from the breakdancing?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an era where like you want to do everything, graffiti,
Right.
rap, DJ, and like I mentioned before, I was fortunate in my crew. There was four DJs, and we would all hang out. We would be at someone's house, and the DJs would practice, and we would be drawing in our sketchbooks, doing graffiti, and there would be times where I'd get on the turntables, and till this day, it's always one of the things that I've always wanted to do is learn how to DJ. So yeah, I've always wanted to pick up that element, but hasn't happened yet. But I've played with turns. I'm familiar with how to connect them from doing so many events. I'm very familiar with how to connect them, and get them to work. But as far as taking it to the extent of calling myself a DJ, no, not yet. But someday, I'm gonna pursue it and get involved with it more.
Zabi, so 2017, you're doing almost all our videos. I want to say 99.9% of our videos for documenting salsa, our Salsa Tuesday, mostly Salsa Tuesday, with sometimes some Friday, sometimes Saturday. I know you did a couple of interviews with Edson de Cuba, a couple of the teachers and stuff like that. Um, you also have you created any stuff online that you've done with your business, what you're doing now? Because I see that you've done some live streaming, and you've gone a little different direction with the what you're doing. So maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, in 2011, I transitioned 100% to really focusing on corporate clients. So, I love hip hop, and I still cover it. I'm still very passionate about it. I'm still very active in it. But my primary full time thing is doing things for companies, which is why I reached out to you, because I wanted to expand my portfolio and really expand the kind of work that I was doing. But yeah, for the most part, like my 9 to 5 is doing things for attorneys, restaurants, gyms, dance studios. I've literally worked for all kind of businesses: dentists, doctors, MRI facilities. I mean, you name it. I've produced video content. I run social media accounts for various large businesses and small businesses. So, but yeah, it came off the base of hip hop. But yeah, till this day, hip hop is still something that I do more as a passion rather than revenue stream. But yeah, my primary 9 to 5 is video production and marketing.
Right. Um, so I mean that you also are I think from what I've seen you on your cover you talk business techniques. That's what I was getting at. What are you doing with that? Because I know you've asked a couple of entrepreneurs to go on your show. What is that in what are you doing with that?
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, business techniques is something that I started actually within the breakdancing hip hop community, because I would get really frustrated with like trying to explain people business, and I decided that I was going to start teaching business techniques. And the whole premise behind that is the to pretty much teach the basic principles of business, as well as the basic principles behind the camera techniques, and why it's important as a dancer and someone within the entertainment industry to understand both. So that was kind of like the original stages. And right when this whole COVID thing happened, right, we were going to start doing it as an actual event at Alhambra. And since that didn't end up happening because of COVID, I decided to take it all completely online, which we were already going to do already. We were going to be doing interviews online, but it's just an extension of those workshops and classes that I was doing. And pretty much I just been interviewing different entrepreneurs, insurance. I've interviews that I've done with an app company, the president of an app company, the president of a law firm. And the whole premise behind it is just really to provide resources to people that are business owners, people that are interested in business, or just people that just want to get a better understanding of business. And I'm a big believer that as a business owner, you can never have too many resources. And everyone's been dropping phenomenal information, and there's always something to learn. And yeah, that's the whole premise behind it, is just to pretty much create a platform that pretty much makes it accessible to people to get knowledge pertaining to business.
All right, so I have a guy, Turo Vasquez Jr. just posted. He said, "Hey guys, any news on Phase Four reopening and dancing scene, events and venues for DJs, live music, and now is does that change the strategy as far as business now for just as far as how what you wanted to do now, business techniques, and now we have it's kind of a different technique. We have to almost readjust, our thinking now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When it comes to events, honestly, I mean, I've done so many events at this stage in my career that if I don't ever do an event again, I mean, I'd be completely satisfied with it. The last 3 years I've done them in Mexico. That was always one of my big passions, is to take my event to Mexico. So I accomplished that. And yeah, I mean, at this stage, if I never do an event again, I'm perfectly okay with that. I've been involved heavily with like the Olympic movement. So yeah, I mean, from a business standpoint, it definitely did a 360. Right now, when COVID hit, the first month I was completely focused on restructuring my business 100% to, you know, making everything remote. All the clients that we're working with now, for the most part, like 90% of the work that we've been doing since COVID started is all done remotely. I have clients that are sending me videos that we're editing, that they're sending me pictures that allows me to, post for them on social media. And I mean, It's interesting because it's helped my business a lot. I haven't been busier since I started my business. I haven't been busier since COVID hit because people are coming to the realization that social media and having a strong online presence, specifically with video and photos, is critical. Before people were a little bit skeptical, but now, I mean, let's face it. I mean, because of COVID, I mean, if you don't have an online presence, whether that's a restaurant, attorney, or anything for that matter, I mean, you're going to be behind big time. So it's helped us tremendously in that regard. As far as people were skeptical before, like they're not skeptical now, because they
Well,
understand.
they're I guess COVID has played their hand in a sense because it's uh it's kind of forced them. Their backs are against the wall. So if they weren't going to do something innovative, they better be hell innovative online. That they because otherwise you're losing your business.
Yeah.
And we know there's unfortunately because of this COVID, there's businesses dropping left and right. There are people, and I don't care what business you are, nobody's infallible to this whole thing. Being at a restaurant, live venue, mom and pop store down the street, grocery store, you name it. There everybody, jewelry store. I mean, I can name on a clothing store, all of everybody. It becomes because people can't do like they used to do. It's not business as usual anymore.
Mhm. Oh
And
yeah, no. Mhm.
go ahead. You were saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, every single market has been impacted, and that's why we've been so busy. Is because now I have clients that were calling me originally and freaking out. I've never had so many people freaking out. Like, what do I do? And the reality is that if you weren't doing things online, I mean, you were really behind. And even now, like if you haven't done anything online yet, it's not too late. It's never too late to get started. But I mean, it's like you said, it's impacted every single business. Attorneys were hit big time because the courts were closed. Even to this day, they're still not a lot of the courts are still open. Like they're not even
So
scheduled to be open until for like another couple of weeks fully. So
right, and that's all through Zoom now.
yeah.
That's going to be through Zoom. So
Yep.
what we're doing now, exactly, it's all going to be through Zoom. So I mean, they're taking their precautions and stuff like that, and I'm sure everybody's taking precautions, and that's just what's um, I know we're a little past. We're going to be come up to our hour. Um, and I think that's one of the things that as business owners, we have to be innovative, especially now with all this is going on. Have you considered doing any? I shouldn't say have you considered. Do you consider anything you're doing that you're doing already? What you already know what you're doing, but you're more busy. Have you done anything that's you can say is innovative because of the COVID? Have you adjusted something and said, okay, this is what I'm doing now because of it?
I mean, not really. I mean, because we were already doing a lot of what we're doing now. It was just kind of like the big major change was that before my main model was to go out, what we were doing with you, right? Going out to your event, capturing it in person, and post producing, a refined edited piece. Now that's secondary. The main thing that we're doing now is we're getting material that clients are sending us that we're editing remotely, and they're sending us pictures remotely. So I'm still shooting, but I mean, I'm very, very, very selective on very, very selective occasions. Like that became secondary, whereas before it was primary. The
Right.
secondary thing that we were doing before was people would send me material to edit and run social media accounts. We've been doing all of that, but that was secondary. Now it's first. So the only thing that happened for us is just flipped it around. So nothing too innovative, just really just modifying the existing formula. So I mean, it did take me a little bit to figure it out. The first month, because it was unexpected. So did it impact me? Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't a major innovation for me because we were already doing these things.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, we're coming up to the time. Do you have any last words for anybody that tuned in? Anybody, all the people that been online with us?
Well, just thank you for the time, Angelo, for allowing me to share a little bit of my story. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your events. It's been a fantastic experience, to throw that in there. I've gotten to meet so many talented artists as a result of working with you, from Tito Puente Jr. to Los Hacheros, so many Domino Saints, Voz to Voz. I mean, I could keep going and going, from the last 3 years that I've worked with you. I mean, so much phenomenal talent, and I love it. I love capturing dance in general. It's my specialty. Obviously with breaking, it gives me a different perspective when it comes to capturing movement. So, capturing
Well,
salsa is a little bit different, but
can I stop you right there?
Mhm.
Um, you did something, or you put together a couple of breakdancers that came to our Salsa Tuesday.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember everybody just being blown away. Why do you think that was, and what aspect does breakdancing have to do with the salsa? What, maybe you can, before you go, can you tell, is there a connection there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the makeup of where breaking came from, it came from the Bronx. I don't know if you've ever seen a documentary from Mambo to Hip Hop, but Mambo to Hip Hop covers the connection between the dance styles very well. And I mean, and to this day, I mean, when you look at breaking, there's a lot of steps that come from salsa and mambo that we just do them with a little bit of a different style. It's a little bit of a stiffer movement, like not as much hip movement as you see in salsa and mambo, but there's obviously very big influences. And when you look at during the mambo era, like when you have like the Machito Orchestra, there were sections where you would be where you see in that documentary where the gentleman is dancing with the woman, and the break comes and the gentleman drops to the floor, and you see them doing what's compared very comparable to breaking. So there's definitely a connection. The music, the break beats that are heard, I mean, there's definitely break beats that come from like Tito Puente and so many artists that are used to this day. You still there, Angelo? There you go.
You were saying that when Chokuba goes to the floor, that's what you were saying.
Yeah, yeah. When I mean, you see it in the documentary from Mambo to Hip Hop, like in the 30s and 40s. I mean, there was a break, like just like in salsa, there's that break where the man would separate from the woman, and you'd see him hit the floor. So and to this day, I mean, there's definitely steps that are still used to this day in breaking. They're slightly different. They're a little bit stiffer, less hip movement, but there's definitely a deep connection between. And then they came from the same neighborhood. Salsa as we know it, came from the Bronx, and breaking, as they say in the documentary, rose from the ashes some what's 50 years later in the same neighborhood. So yeah, there is a very very deep connection. But to answer your question, I mean, when we did it, and why is it so impactful? I mean, there's nothing like breaking. I mean, when you see someone spin on your head, I mean, you're not really supposed to be able to do that, and to be able to spin and to do the movements that you do in breaking, I mean, is just it's breathtaking. There's just if you like dance and if you like any type of movement, whether that's karate or any kind of martial arts, I mean, you can't help but to look at that and say, wow, like these guys are doing something that you don't see. I mean, you don't see it in anything else, and to kind of quote a dancer that I interviewed in Mexico. His name is Leo. He's a younger guy, and I asked him, what are your thoughts on breaking? And he said that breaking is the dance of the gods, because it's a dance that is in charge of evolving the evolving humanity from a physical perspective. Because when you look at what we do as dancers, from spinning on your head to air flares to all of these movements, the technicality that's required for it is absolutely insane. Like you just do not see in any other dance style, which is why.
I,
No,
I was going to say, and to go into what I think you were about to say is why it's going into Olympics, right? That's
there you go. I mean, why is it that no other dance has made it into the Olympics? And that's an interesting one, because I mean, for 20 years, they've been trying to get other dance styles into the Olympics, and they've constantly been unsuccessful. And the second that they pitch breaking, it gets in, and a part of that is because salsa is more of a social dance. So it's breaking is very direct. If I'm competing against you, you're gonna know it. In salsa, it's not like that. It's not competitive. It's a partner dance.
Right.
Whereas breaking is it's born in that competition where it kind of replaced fighting, from the era that it came from in the gangs in New York. And obviously it didn't stop the fights completely, but it was an alternative to fighting. So there is that direct competitiveness that is definitely seen that you don't see in other dance styles. In ballet, what would it, if someone went up to somebody and tried to compete with somebody in ballet, I think it would look a little bit funny. Like it's judged independently, whereas breaking is judged from how you interact with the person that you're competing against directly. It's a very
Well, I
direct.
mean, I mean, in gymnastics, and obviously it takes a lot of gymnastics, and you better be fit as hell if you're going to be breakdancing, and especially if you're going to the Olympics. It's got to be equivalent to the gymnasts that are performing on the floor show, and it's a floor show in itself, you know, and I'm sure there's going to be whole technique, timing, and just like anything else that that the Olympic committees are going to be judging, there's going to be, because we know there's a lot of good breakdancers out there. And you could be a phenomenal breaker, but if you don't have the timing as well as the what's the word I'm using that we used to always when we used to break dance, because we have to continue the move. It isn't just doing the move. We have to, from this move to next move, and executing the move. That's the word I was using. Execution. You got to make sure that you want to execute it correctly. And it's breakdancing is not easy, and it's not just spinning in your head. I know that. There's a lot more to it.
No, you're right. I mean, and the thing about it is that the way that it's evolved, I mean, when you see like the kids, for example, I say it all the time. I mean, I've been around breaking since the 90s, and to see the kids now, I mean, I'm just mind blown, like the level but before you wouldn't see that many kids, especially kids doing things at a high level. And now, I mean, the kids now, I mean, it's utterly mind blowing, like the level of technicality that some of these kids, there's little girls around the world that are doing moves that are just insane, so it's definitely evolved. Like when you look at breaking from like the 80s to now, it's gone. That's why, what I said earlier with the gentleman that I was kind of quoting from Mexico, of him saying that, it's the dance of the gods, because when it comes to the physical aspect, because of the evolution behind it, and you can see it from the 80s till now, and it's there. When you look at breaking, I mean, the movements have gotten more difficult. People are spending longer. The rounds are longer. Before, they were shorter. You wouldn't really, in the early 2000s, you really wouldn't see people dance for more than like maybe 15-30 seconds. And like now you're seeing 1 minute, to like a minute and a half on some occasions. And that's a big difference, in terms of.
Well, Miguel, to defend all my breakdancers, minimum was a minute for us. I'm just letting you know. It was because I know what you're talking about. I and I think that's what happened for us.
Mm.
We seen it become a guy doing something quick, and it was like, nah, man, you got to do a routine. You got to do a minute, minute and a half, sometimes 2 minutes. Sometimes that's what we would do. We would do 2 minutes, and it was a lot of work. But then I think that's how come we kind of, and personally, obviously as I got older, but I was like, this is becoming not a little kid thing, but it became like it was losing its focus as I was getting older. And I think the focus was that it wasn't about the art form anymore. It was just trying to do a move. And they would do a move, and then they get up, and I'm like, what is that? That was kind of what we were seeing. So for us, that started in this industry, we were like kind of like, that's your battle move, one move. I mean, because we had to do the up rocking, we had to do the pop locking, and then we did the moves, and then we did this and that, and then we jumped on the floor, we did the spin on the back, and we did the whole. and it was a combination, and we did like 5 moves we had to do, and then we freeze, right? That would be our ending.
That would mean you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be our
Even
ending.
that, like when
But
routines are a little bit different when there's more than one person. That was happening in the early 2000s, and then I think in that defense too, because popping and locking are two completely different dance styles. Like that's not a part of breaking. I know that here in the early 80s, people mixed it up, but they're
yeah,
not.
we did.
But it's not the same dance style. Locking came from the West Coast, and popping is a different dance style. Which is, people say it a lot, pop locking, but they're even that in itself, they're two completely different dance styles that have two completely different ways of looks. But yeah, you definitely saw it within breaking culture, but it's definitely its own thing. But yeah, like I said, I mean, it's just throughout the history, the rounds have just gotten more technical and longer, and it's just been a pretty crazy evolution to
Oh,
it.
and trust me, what the guys do now, I couldn't even touch, because it was
I mean,
just
like I told you, some of these kids, I mean, the energy that they have, I mean, they can go out for days, like they have the energy for it. So the combination of them having that youthful energy and the technique that's been developed, it's just, yeah, I wouldn't want to compete against some of these kids, like it's just mind blowing.
right. All right, Miguel, thank you very much for coming on to the show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is the Front Door Show, and this is Miguel Tech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it.